Hello again. I want to continue this dialogue about the Heart Circle and this book that I'm reading called Radically Gay by Will Roscoe, and it's the biography of Harry Hay. And it's really interesting because it's a biography, but not in the way that a lot of people think. It's not telling you about, his vacations or who his favorite celebrity is or anything like that. It's a biography of his ideas, and in that it's remarkable. In the detail he goes into and in the breadth of his intellect, it's really remarkable. So anyway, I've been moving along, and I got to the chapter about the Berdache, and I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And a Berdache is, in tribal culture, was the cultural, spiritual, political leaders. And he really explores the history of this in great detail. And he talks about the Feast of Fools, and he goes into, hunter-gatherer cultures and things of that nature. And usually the Berdache was a gay man, or sometimes a lesbian, and sometimes a transgender person. And he talks about this from hunter-gatherer to agricultural to agrarian societies where we're domesticating animals. And he talks about how gay men and homosexuality and gender fluidity were pushed to the side, and also matrifocal lineage where women controlled the wealth in their lineage. He talks about how that was pushed aside the more we moved towards the domestication of animals, and also as land began to be owned by very powerful families and dynasties, who then created an official Berdache, or what he calls a state Berdache, where the most powerful people had their official spiritual institutions and everything else was illegal. And then they ran the economy through slaves. And you can see this in Egypt or in Roman times, and you go around the planet and find examples. But he talks about this as a predecessor for, or when this occurs, you can expect collapse to happen in those societies, because the slaves have no investment in the culture. They have no spiritual voice in the culture, and the fruits of their labor go directly to the most powerful people. And of course, a lot of people today think we live in a slave economy where people are burdened with debt that they'll have the rest of their lives, and they have jobs that the production of those jobs goes directly to the 1% who own most of everything on this planet. And so what he's asking, and what a very valid question for today, and what I feel I would like to talk about in these heart circles, is that do we, as gay men, have a message outside of the state-approved spiritual institutions? And if so, what is it? Because one of the things that I see in the LGBT and all that culture is this desire to not question the state spiritual institutions, but to try to fit into them. And so you have, and also the political organizations, so you have like the Human Rights Campaign and the Democratic Party, and they toe a very specific line, and they only question so far, and we're really seeing this during this election. But also, there was a time when I lived in Tucson where I went to all these different churches and temples. So I went to Catholic, Episcopal, Methodist. I went to a Buddhist temple, a Jewish temple, and I just explored all these different concepts in religion. And just I tried to stand back and keep my emotions out of it, and just from an intellectual point of view, to experience it. And what I found is that even in the most liberal of these institutions, they still stay well within a very heteronormative dialogue. So while we might be welcomed as gay people, we certainly cannot control the message within those congregations. So, for instance, like the Unitarians, they have a little ceremony where they bring all the children up and they tell a poignant story to the children, and then they sing a song when they're sending them back. So, it's very family friendly and it's very children friendly. And another thing is there's this new Sunday assembly, and I looked into them, and one, they were celebrating Father's Day, and the other was they were going to play Pokemon Go with the children. So, it's all focused around the family. And while gay people are most certainly welcome there, as long as we accept the heteronormative dialogue, then we can stay there, we'll be tolerated. But if we question that in any way, then that's when the trouble begins. And I know this firsthand because I have questioned it. And I've seen other gay men question it with the same results, so it wasn't just me. There is a line, and we're told if you stay well within that, you're okay. But if you start to question these heterosexual families and their prerogative in life, then you're going to get into trouble. And so that's why I just find his thoughts so provocative on this. And I would really like to hear other people discuss this, especially within the fairy gay men community. And one of the things that I was thinking about is that oftentimes when either I go to a church or even like the most liberal churches, I always find myself self-censoring. I find myself uncomfortable because I think, well, if I really say what's on my mind, then if I really because they were always saying, well, we're here to share and we're here to be community. But if I really were to say what's on my mind, it would be so upsetting that I would be seen as an outsider immediately. And I've tested this, and it's definitely true. So it's almost like in order to belong to these spiritual institutions, it's more like a country club where you have to prove your merit and to belong there. And so this is what I think when I'm sitting in a church or some other spiritual institution. And I know this is on other people's minds, so I really ask you to talk about this. And that is that pretty much everything in our society, every physical thing that we own, has been brought to us by oil. And the paint on our walls, this carpeting, is oil. It's a polymer, and it feels like a fabric, but in fact the threads have been made out of some sort of plastic vinyl or something like that, which is oil. And any finish, like a paint finish, that's all oil-based, even if it's acrylic, if it's called acrylic or whatever, it's still oil. And even something that is not made directly out of oil, it took oil to get it to where it is through transportation or some machine or something like that. So everything goes back fundamentally to oil. And so, well, while people are celebrating having more children and they're talking about the comfort of the space that they created, and this is really my point. A lot of times people go to church or, a pagan circle or a temple, Buddhist temple or whatever, for the comfort. Because we are most happiest as human beings when we are around other people sharing an experience. And when it's a profound spiritual experience, that can be really relevant in our lives and create profound happiness in us. So, there are all these songs about the comfort of these spiritual communities. And that's where it gets me, because I think, well, it may be comfortable, but everything around you at this very moment is in fact destroying that comfort. Everything we own, and all of these new children you're having are going to have to face this fact, and the more children you bring onto this planet, the more difficult it's going to be. So the state Berdache says just ignore that. Just ignore that your political candidate supports more drilling and more pipelines and more wars for oil. She tolerates you as a gay person, so, What else do you need? Or just ignore this candidate's record in supporting banks or industries that destroy the habitat and the ecology. He is a friend to the gay community. So, you know, and just ignore that this church has a long history of oppression and violence, and that their holy books support slavery and rape and incest. They're allowing you to sit in the church and not be attacked, so what more do you want? And what more I want is to be... I've been posting a few videos onto this fairy site, but this message is being talked about all over the world by various spiritual groups who are not part of the official state Berdache, the official state spiritual institution. Native Americans, African tribal religions, you know, places that are on the outskirts of this. And I would love to see radical fairies talk about this at heart circles. All of this stuff is destroying us right this very second. We are at the great disruption of fairydom, and yet we are being told as gay men to just fit into the official Berdache. And of course, many of the priests and priestesses of the official Berdache, of the official state spiritual institutions, are gays and lesbians, and they are very much invested in their official status. So this is where it gets difficult. We are indeed everywhere. And that's another thing I'd love for other fairies and gay men to talk about from a radical perspective of, what do you do about that? They're gay and we're gay. What is there a message from the non-official Berdache that we can deliver to let them know that in fact they are digging us deeper and deeper into a really serious problem? So again, I have a video, YouTube video channel called My Fabulous Apocalypse, and I'm exploring this and I'm talking about this, but I'm also going to do these heart circle videos, especially for the radical fairies. And I would love to do this in person, but I also think, you know, if you can't get out of the house, if it's too expensive, if it's too much of a hassle to get into that traffic, by all means, respond in kind, respond in video, and it's a valid way. And of course, this is all part of our demise. These computers are all part of our demise. So we're using the tools. You see what I mean? It's like when you go to church, it becomes like this mind fuck, you know. We want this place of spiritual comfort and enlightenment and uplifting, and the whole thing is currently part of our demise. What do we do about that? Where's the door? Anybody know where the door is? I mean, we liken ourselves to be spiritually evolved. Then let's talk about this in a circle. And I'm not saying that I have the answers, but I do read a lot, and I have paid close attention to the science of climate change, and not only that, but the habitat destruction and the loss of resources and overpopulation. And it seems like many spiritual cultures around the world are discussing this, so I open up this heart circle for us to discuss this. And with that, I will pass a talisman to you, and blessed be.